Somewhere out there, buried beneath centuries of sand, sealed under ancient ice, or carved deep into forgotten stone, lies something we were never meant to find. Not a legend, not a myth, but something real. A tomb with no body. A temple built to melt light on a single day each year. These aren't stories from books. They're archaeological records, quietly tucked away and barely spoken about. We're going to walk through them, slowly, gently, like wandering a museum at night while the world is asleep. So if you're ready to explore places most people don't even know exist, stick around. And hey, go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. There's so much more waiting to be uncovered. By the way, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Just curious. Madagascar's lost megaliths. It begins with the hush of the jungle. Imagine your boots sinking into damp, moss-soft earth. Tall trees rise all around you, towering in a misty cathedral of green. Morning light breaks through the canopy in shifting beams, each one illuminating drifting motes of moisture that hang like silent sentries. There's no trail here, only the quiet rhythm of breath and step, and a distant bird call echoing as though through a dream. Then, almost without warning, the forest opens into something extraordinary. Massive granite blocks, stacked high and aligned in precise formations, rise from the jungle floor. Moss cloaks their surfaces, vines drape between them like natural curtains, and it becomes clear. These are not random stones. They are built structures, shaped by human hands long ago, carefully placed and then abandoned to time. Your heartbeat slows. You tiptoe closer, almost speaking in a whisper to the stones. These walls form open-air chambers, rectangular enclosures crumbling into earth, but still echoing purpose. Doorways stand like silent gateways, and corridors fade gently into shadow. There is no roof, no mummy, no treasure, but immense presence. This place is unnamed on any map, untouched by modern fame. It carries the weight of mystery without a single sign or plaque, and you feel deep in your bones the pull of its story. Back in the 1950s, French botanists first heard the rumors. Locals spoke of Zanahary Vato, stones of spirit, sacred places carved into the very heart of the forest. They spoke in hushed voices about ancestry, whispered that the stones held memories of people who walked here long ago, but they were cautious, protective, refusing to lead outsiders into the jungle's depths, as though guarding something precious beyond words. No one recorded these stones. No scholar sketched them. They slipped into obscurity, hidden from maps and textbooks. Until decades later, a single satellite image revealed an anomaly, a perfect rectangle in the green. A team was assembled, a small group of scientists and adventurers guided by rumor and pixelated geometry. At dawn in 2010, they cut a new path through vines and stepped into history. The first light found the walls. The team stopped in awe. These stones are heavy, several tons each, and fitted with millimeter-level precision. They mapped out rectangular courtyards, door frames, thresholds, corridors. Nothing dome-like, nothing subterranean, but rather an outdoor sanctuary shaped by intention. No urns or idols, no bones or offerings, only stone breathing with moss and earth. Among the finds were stone hammers, quartzite chips, fragments of painted pottery in warm reds and ochres, and charcoal scorched from ancient fires. Radiocarbon tests placed the age of the site around 1000 CE, around 1,000 years ago. Medieval by many standards. Yet here, tools existed that enabled people to shape and place these stones with astonishing care. The question they left behind felt endless. Why here? Why build, and then simply leave? Local lore has grown richer over time. People claim that on the solstice, at night, moonlight traces a glowing path across the tallest stones, illuminating hidden patterns beneath. Some say at midnight, if you stand quietly, the forest pulses gently, as though echoing with footsteps not your own. Is this superstition, or memory encoded into architecture? They call the stones spiritual, but these walls speak of intelligence too. Someone understood geometry, movement through space, ancient methods of quarrying and transport. They understood how to shape earth and stone on an intimate scale, and then they vanished. Now conservationists and archaeologists are in gentle conflict. Some argue to leave the stones untouched. Let silence preserve the saga. Others want to dig deeper, to reveal layers and names and stories. But every passing year leaves the ruins one season closer to being reclaimed. Moss grows thicker, vines grow stronger, and the forest starts to unmake what hands once shaped. A local elder once said quietly, "If these stones disappear under moss, our stories disappear too." The desire to protect them is not just about rocks, it's about cultural memory. Compare this site to Cambodia's jungle temples or Peru's lost cities, but here there are no grand staircases, no temple towers. There are only humble stones rising in respectful formation, humble giants, and yet beneath their quiet presence lies human effort, artistry, foresight, and belief. What we still don't know is far greater than what we can touch. We don't know the builders' names, their purpose, their rituals. We don't know whether this was a place of ceremony or an epic communal space. We only know the stones remained, carefully placed, then abandoned, silent. Now they wait for someone to listen again. As dawn returns, the forest awakes. Light washes over the stones. Leaves hum in stirring wind. Moss pulses with dew. Your memories of this place begin to take root, because the stones teach a fragile lesson. You don't need gold or spray-painted icons to leave a mark on history. Sometimes leaving space, empty rooms and silent walls, is the most powerful story you can tell. And that, perhaps, is why these megaliths remain, not hidden, but quietly holding space for the past to speak in silence. The Devil's Tower of Sicily. It begins with the soft hum of dawn on Sicilian limestone plains. Your footsteps crackle over scattered shards of ancient pottery, crumbled evidence of lives long turned to dust. In the distance stands a lone column, jagged, weather-worn, and impossibly tall. They call it the Devil's Tower, though its origins lie in silence and dust, shaped by hands we'll never know. Local shepherds have tales. Lights flicker around it at night, as if embers of ancient fires still burn. They say the wind there whistles in odd patterns, like voices echoing through stone. But everyone's careful. No one ventures too near after dusk. Something about the place both draws you close and keeps you wary. You step forward. The column stands alone on a flat plateau surrounded by scrubland. It's basalt, or maybe limestone, carved with such precision that it defies the tools of its time. No obvious tool marks, only smooth, straight edges, so perfect they seem machine-made. As you run your fingers along the grooves, they're cool, unblemished, eerily intact beneath thousands of years of weathering. Archaeologists first visited in the 1960s, only to find it standing without foundation, almost balanced by the earth beneath it. Surveys of the rock beneath revealed a polished socket where the column once fit into an unseen base, as though the rest of the structure vanished. But this one piece remained, waiting. Satellite imaging hints at foundations hidden under scrub platforms and building outlines, now swallowed by moss and soil. Pottery shards, tool fragments, even a broken statue footage suggests this was part of a larger temple complex, and yet no inscriptions, no records from Greek, Phoenician, or Roman authors. Only the column, alone and enigmatic. Dating methods place the tower around 1500 BCE, Middle Bronze Age. This predates classical Greek settlements in Sicily. A Bronze Age monument in remote scrubland, built with extraordinary precision. Who built it? Why here? What did it align with? Local folk stories say the tower points toward a long-lost temple across the valley, visible only when the morning light splits the stone just so. Others say it marks the sleeping place of a buried titan, or perhaps a judge of the underworld, who was neither Greek nor Roman. One elderly man swore he once heard laughter at midnight, the stone laughing back. The tower became a subject of academic controversy. Some say natural erosion shaped it. Basalt cliffs crumble, leaving monoliths. Others insist on human assistance. The grooves are too straight, the edges too right angle. Tool shadows don't align with erosion patterns. The column, they say, was sculpted, not born from stone. Teams have experimented with Bronze Age tools, hammerstones, stone chisels, and achieved rough shapes, but nothing like this. Tight edges, flat faces, millimeter tolerances. Could Bronze Age people use rope, wooden wedges, heated and cooled to cleave stone in straight lines? It's possible, but difficult enough to shape and rotate a 10-ton column, upright it without modern cranes. It seems improbable. Was this a sacred marker? A calendar stone aligned to equinox sunrise? When the sun cracks the stone precisely at dawn, shadows flatten its face, like a message written in light across centuries. Or did it hold an idol or staff, long since removed, leaving only the bearer behind? Over time, conservationists argued for leaving the site alone. Other archaeologists want to excavate deeper, unearth the foundations, carefully piece the puzzle. But the tower resists progress. Digging shakes its base. Nearby noise makes it creak. It's as if the stone itself whispers, "Be careful." Other towers have been found, fragmented column bases in caves. Sheer cliffs show straight grooves, suggesting quarrying. Perhaps this plateau was once a workshop, a sacred quarry where people shaped stone, worshipped its power, and oriented themselves by its shadow. In twilight you climb the plateau again. Your boots press each footstep into the dust. The column stands above you, its silhouette bold against orange skies. A gentle breeze lifts dust at its base, sending circling currents beneath the stone. With each exhale, you wonder, did someone once speak here? Did their words carry out across the plain? Will we ever hear them again? As darkness deepens, torches in villages flicker. Some say the tower guides lost travelers home. Others warn it draws wanderers toward its base, standing watch. But it remains, solitary, enigmatic, unmoved, a memory chiseled in stone. So we leave it standing, neither destroyed nor fully understood, a monument to unanswered questions. The forgotten underground caves of Longyu. The mystery begins not in the sands of Egypt or beneath ancient Mesopotamian cities, but in the quiet village of Xi'an, nestled in China's Zhejiang province, a small place surrounded by farmland, water buffaloes, and rice paddies. There is nothing extraordinary here, at least not on the surface. In the summer of 1992, a group of curious villagers made a decision that would unravel one of the most astonishing and undocumented archaeological enigmas of the modern era. They were simply trying to deepen a pond, something farmers did when water was scarce. With diesel pumps, they began draining the pool, expecting muddy sediment, but as the water receded, what emerged changed everything. Instead of swampy ground, they found a vast, empty cavern, smooth walls, stone pillars, carved archways, steps that led nowhere, and it was just the beginning. One cave led to another, then dozens more. Today we know of at least 24 such caves, all hand-carved, each immense in scale, and not one of them mentioned in a single historical record. No royal decree, no ancient text, no folklore, nothing. And that absence, that silence, is perhaps the loudest part of the mystery. Each cave averages around 30 meters in height, stretching out over thousands of square meters, with ceilings supported by precisely carved stone pillars and fluted ridges. The walls are marked with parallel chisel lines, consistent, deliberate, and uniform, as if carved by machines, though done thousands of years ago. But no machines were found, no tools, no inscriptions, just endless rows of hand-chiseled rock, cut with such skill that engineers today still cannot fully explain how they did it. The total volume of rock removed from these caves is staggering. By some estimates, over 1 million cubic meters of sandstone was excavated, and yet not a single piece of that debris has ever been found. Where did it all go? There are no discarded stone piles in the surrounding fields, no pits or ditches filled with rubble, nothing. The entire operation appears to have been executed with the precision of an industrial project and the secrecy of a hidden civilization. Who built the Longyu caves, and why? Some have suggested that they were ancient granaries, storage sites for grain in times of famine, but no remnants of organic materials have been found. Others believe they were military bunkers or hiding places, but that too lacks support. There are no signs of habitation, no fire pits, no smoke marks, no artifacts. Some caves contain what appear to be stages or raised platforms. Others feature tall vertical shafts that let in faint beams of light, as though they were meant to draw the eye upward or perhaps serve as acoustic chambers? Could they have been temples, or a forgotten underground city? Even more strange is the silence of Chinese historical records, which are among the most meticulous in the ancient world. The Chinese have documented dynasties, weather patterns, and comets, but no mention exists of these caves being carved. Not during the Qin dynasty, not during the Han, not in oral history. It's as if the builders deliberately erased themselves, and yet, someone did this. Thousands of laborers must have worked for decades, perhaps centuries, to carve these vast spaces, chiseling away stone one line at a time. The man-hours alone are mind-bending. What kind of society could mobilize such an effort without leaving any written trace? Some researchers suggest the caves are around 2,000 years old, though there's no firm date. No organic material means no carbon dating. Only the style of chisel marks and erosion patterns provide clues, but even that is debated. Some scholars say the fluted markings resemble designs used in tombs from the Han dynasty, while others argue they predate written Chinese history entirely. A few go further. They suggest that the Longyu caves weren't created by the Chinese at all, but by a prehistoric culture long lost to time, a civilization so old that its language, customs, and very memory have vanished, leaving only these empty halls as a whisper from the past. Of course, not everyone agrees. Skeptics believe they're abandoned quarries, carved slowly over time for building materials. But if so, why carve deep inside a mountain instead of taking easier stone from outside? Why the pillars? Why the symmetry? Why the effort? And again, why the silence? One cave contains what looks like a carved fish, etched deep into a wall. Its purpose, unknown. Its meaning, forgotten. Another contains what might be a stepped throne or altar, carved from a single block, elevated and aligned with a narrow vertical shaft. Perhaps it was meant to catch sunlight on specific days of the year, or perhaps it's a coincidence, but nothing in these caves feels accidental. In some parts of the caves, when you clap your hands or speak loudly, the sound bounces back in unexpected ways. The acoustics are precise, possibly intentional, designed to amplify or distort voices. Could ceremonies have been performed here? Sound rituals, storytelling? We may never know. Even modern scientists remain puzzled. Engineers from around the world have studied the caves, trying to model how they could have been built using only Bronze Age tools. The simulations always fall short. The workload is too vast, the symmetry too precise, the logistics too daunting. Were there forgotten techniques now lost, or a motivation we can't comprehend? The Longyu caves remain a riddle, a project so massive it should have changed the course of history, but didn't. A feat so grand it should have echoed through dynasties, but never did. What were they hiding? What did they mean to the people who built them? And why, when all else was recorded and passed down, was this the one thing the ancients left in complete silence? Whatever the answer, the caves remain, cool, empty, watching, beneath the village, beneath the rice fields, beneath the everyday rhythms of life. Something ancient still waits, a puzzle carved into stone, begging to be understood. And perhaps, when the world is finally ready to listen, not to conquer, not to label, but to understand, these long-forgotten halls will whisper their secrets once more. Jordan's empty tomb of whispered stones. In the highlands of southern Jordan, far from the ancient ruins of Petra, and away from the caravan roads carved by time, there lies a windswept slope, barely noticed by passing travelers. It's not a place that draws tourists. There are no dramatic columns or statues, no temples etched into rose-red cliffs, just a quiet hillside of rock and dust, until the rains came. In early 2017, an unusually heavy seasonal flood rolled through a narrow wadi, cutting new scars into the earth. When the waters receded, a local shepherd named Harif noticed something strange on a hill he'd walked his entire life. A section of the slope had crumbled away, revealing a flat rectangular stone out of place among the natural formations. The edges were too straight, the position too exact. It looked placed, word traveled, locals gathered, and eventually, a small archaeological team from Amman University arrived to investigate. What they found was a sealed subterranean tomb, its stones carefully stacked, and its entrance hidden for thousands of years. Unlike many ancient grave sites in the region, it had never been looted, never disturbed. The outer stones had held fast for generations, undetected, unnoticed, untouched. But when the archaeologists finally opened it, they found nothing. No bones, no ashes, no inscriptions, no offerings of gold, pottery, or sacred oil, no markings to speak of a king or a priest, not a single trace of human remains. And yet, everything else told them that this was a tomb. Stone benches were carved into the chamber walls. Hollowed depressions in the floor mirrored those used in ritual burials across the ancient Levant. And most striking of all, at the heart of the chamber lay a deliberate arrangement of river stones, smooth, oval-shaped, and placed in a perfect spiral pattern, not naturally formed, not scattered randomly, but carefully, lovingly positioned, like a message in stone from someone who never wanted to be forgotten. Why would someone build such a tomb, only to leave it empty? Was it symbolic? A decoy? A sacred space for someone whose body was never recovered? Or does it hint at a forgotten tradition, one where memory mattered more than remains? Some archaeologists believe it could have been a cenotaph, a tomb built for a person who died elsewhere. But that doesn't explain the stones. Others think it was never meant for a person at all, but for something else entirely. One theory suggests the spiral of stones represents the soul's journey. In many early Levantine cultures, spirals symbolized life cycles, birth, death, and rebirth. Could this have been a spiritual monument? Not to the dead, but to the eternal. But then again, there's the silence. No records, no mention of this tomb in ancient texts, no other structures nearby. It's not part of a cemetery. It's alone. And yet the craftsmanship suggests care, intention, devotion. What culture would invest such effort into an unmarked, uninhabited tomb? The chamber's architecture resembles early Bronze Age styles, though carbon dating of the soil suggests it might be even older, possibly late Chalcolithic, over 6,000 years ago. That would make it older than the pyramids of Egypt, older than Stonehenge. And still, no one knows why it's there. Some visitors say the tomb feels unsettling, not haunted, just strangely alive, as if the silence inside is not emptiness, but waiting, as if the air itself is holding its breath. Some researchers even recorded unusual acoustic behavior within the chamber. Voices carry strangely. Sounds seem to echo before they're made. It's as if the room is whispering back. Could the stones themselves be part of the message? In ancient cultures, smooth river stones were often placed in tombs to represent purity or to weigh down spirits. In some traditions, they were believed to carry memory. Each stone placed by someone who remembered the person or honored the soul. But this spiral, it wasn't randomly added. It was planned. Some researchers attempted to match the spiral's shape with astronomical patterns. Could it align with the stars? A solstice? A constellation? So far, nothing conclusive. But the question remains, why seal an empty tomb? Could it have been meant for a future burial that never happened? Or a burial that didn't require a body? Across the world, there are other examples, sparse and scattered, of so-called false tombs. Tombs meant to fool grave robbers. Tombs meant to carry names, not remains. But this chamber in Jordan is different. It's quiet in a way that feels purposeful. No deception. No distraction. Just stone. Clean, silent, eternal. When the team returned later that year to continue excavation, they discovered something stranger still. On a ridge not far from the tomb, buried under just a few feet of soil, were 3 more spiral arrangements, smaller, shallower, but crafted from the same river stones. No chambers, no walls, just spirals, aligned in a way that when plotted, formed a triangle pointing southwest toward the ancient trade routes that once led pilgrims toward Petra and beyond. Had travelers passed this way and left stones in remembrance? Had this place once been a kind of spiritual waypoint? We may never know, but what we do know is this. Someone, thousands of years ago, chose this hill, chose these stones, chose this spiral and this silence, and sealed it up, not in fear, but in reverence. What kind of belief leads you to bury nothing? What kind of memory endures without a name? In the quiet hills of Jordan, where the wind whispers through stone, and the sun fades slowly into red dust, there lies a tomb, empty, still, waiting. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point. Sometimes, the mystery isn't in what's missing, but in what was left behind. Cambodia's Elephant Cavern. The forest sighing, a delicate breeze stirring rice paddies and ancient trees at the edge of Cambodia's Cardamom Mountains. Somewhere nearby, a faint rumble echoes, like distant drums. You follow the sound, stepping over twisted roots and soft soil, until the forest gives way to a mossy cavern mouth, high upon a limestone cliff. Sunlight pools at the entrance, revealing something astonishing. The cave wall curves into the unmistakable shape of an elephant's head, trunk, eye, ear, magnified across stone, twice your height. It's so precise, so evocative, that you might blink and believe it was sculpted by human hands. But this isn't a carving, it's nature, the limestone weathered over millennia, though some villagers swear otherwise. They call it Priya Chan, the sacred elephant, and believe it's an ancient guardian, watching over hidden temples and silent waterways. On full moon nights, they say lanterns flicker around its base, as if unseen monks still pause to pay their respects. You step inside. The air is cool, fragrant with damp stone, and incense brought by pilgrims. The elephant's trunk shape folds into the cavern's shadows. A low drumming begins, a heartbeat of the cave. It's not wind or water, it's your breath, it's your pulse. It's an echo of presence on stone. Soft steps follow. Monks in muted saffron robes move quietly, placing incense at a natural platform below the elephant's eye. They whisper silent prayers. For ages, this cavern has been more than a rock. It's a living sanctuary, carved not by chisels but by erosion, rain, and human devotion. At first glance, geology tells a story. Uplifted reef, tectonic shifts, rainwater carving channels. But the elephant's eye, a perfect oval, sat exactly at a point where light filters through a narrow crevice at twilight. The trunk plunges into darkness, ending at a pool of crystalline water that mirrors the ceiling. Geologists marvel. Features align too precisely to be random. Could nature imitate ritual, or did humans perceive the shape and sanctify the space? In 2015, a team of archaeologists arrived, drawn by local legends and satellite-mapped cave entrances. They discovered more than they expected: small shrines, remnants of pottery with faint lotus designs, and a stone basin carved into the cavern floor. Carbon-dated charcoal suggests meditative use, dating back over 1,200 years, well into the Angkorian period. But the human presence seems older. They found fragments of jade beads and broken bronze bells, objects likely hidden by devotees fleeing invasion, camouflaged by centuries of property passed through generations of villagers. It seems stones formed the elephant image naturally, but humans noticed. They left offerings, lit fires, and constructed small altars there. And perhaps, just perhaps, humans even shaped the cavern further by chiseling subtle terraces or deepening the pool to collect rainwater. The elephant cavern became a pilgrimage site, but not on grand temple routes. No map marks it. No travel guide mentions it. It is a hushed secret, guarded by jungle and memory, discovered only by patient footsteps and attentive eyes. You enter the inner chamber, where stalactites descend like silent fingers. Their tips glint in torchlight. Nearby, low benches carved into limestone suggest gatherings, not tombs. People once sat here listening. They believed the cave itself breathed wisdom. Geophysical scans reveal shafts and passages continuing beyond the elephant's form. Some fill with seasonal water, rising and falling with monsoons. Could this be a network of caves used for ritual, a hidden retreat from the royal capital, or simply a place chosen for its natural echo and elephant guardian? Scientists remain divided. Many argue that it's a geological wonder, nature's art. Evidence shows no major chisels or cut marks on the elephant shape. It's weathered stone folded by time, but the way light plays upon it, especially during specific lunar phases, is uncanny. Every November, during the Pershemben Ancestor Festival, moonlight enters just so, illuminating the elephant's eye. A silent spectacle, long unnoticed by most. Villagers who tend the cave say the elephant protects water sources. They climb down to its mirrored pool, and sprinkle rice grains, choosing the spot where the trunk meets the floor. If grains drift toward a darker recess, they believe blessings came through the elephant. If they float flat, divination is unclear. It's quiet, personal, sacred. Archaeological teams later installed sensors while villagers performed the ritual. Unexplained changes. Air pressure dropped slightly, triggering faint echoes and changing the reflections in the pool. No explanation yet. It may be natural, or it may be something more. Late one afternoon, you sit among monks in meditation. The cave seems to breathe. Your pulse slows. The light fades, but something remains luminous, a reminder of human devotion to nature's wonders. You leave feeling as though you touched something ancient, vibrating between earth and spirit. Outside, the walls of stone loom larger in dying daylight. The elephant stands silent, guarding secrets hewn by time. Was this cavern made for ritual, or did humans infuse the space with spirit, recognizing something older than culture? Perhaps neither is exclusive. Perhaps the magic lies in recognition, in quiet reverence for a shape sculpted by nature and sanctified by humankind. As darkness drapes over the forest, distant chants drift through trees, and the elephant cavern in Cambodia continues its watch. It's not just a cave, it's a living mystery. Sri Lanka's moonstone maze. They call it Sandakata Pahana. The word rolls off the tongue like a whisper from 1,000 years ago. In the ancient city of Anuradhapura, beneath a canopy of warm breeze and temple bells, lies something you might miss if you weren't looking closely. It's just a stone, half a circle, nestled at the foot of a temple staircase. Smooth, weathered, quiet, but once you see it, once you truly notice it, you'll feel something tighten in your chest. It's as if the stone is looking back. A moonstone. A perfect half moon carved into the very threshold of sacred ground. It's meant to be stepped over, but not without respect, not without pause, because this isn't just a decorative piece of floor. This is a riddle, a puzzle in concentric rings, a story locked in symbols, or maybe a kind of ancient machine that was never made to move. Step closer. The outermost ring is wild. Horses, elephants, lions, bulls, all marching in a loop, their legs frozen mid-stride, their eyes impossibly alive for carvings centuries old. They repeat in order, 4 creatures, 4 cycles. It's the circle of life, some say, the endless rebirth, death, and return of all things. But others believe it's more than that, more precise, more mechanical. Now look inward. The next band shows creeping vines, curling and spiraling like galaxies. It's delicate, almost hypnotic. Beneath your feet, time seems to slow. Inside that, a procession of swans glides along a thinner ring. But these birds, so graceful, are not random. They symbolize purity of mind, some scholars say. The passage from the chaos of the outer world into the inner sanctum of peace, still closer to the center now. Then, a ring of lotus petals, symmetrical, perfect. The lotus, the bloom of enlightenment, the still point in the turning world. Right at the center of the moonstone lies the full blossom lotus, unmoving, silent, at peace. But here's what no one agrees on. Is this a piece of spiritual art, or is it a blueprint? A few years ago, a group of scholars quietly, almost reluctantly, published a paper in a fringe academic journal. Their idea, the moonstones were not just spiritual symbols. They were astronomical diagrams, designed to track the lunar calendar with startling precision. Each creature, each swirl, each petal, they proposed was numerically aligned with known lunar phases and planetary cycles. It sounded impossible. After all, these stones were laid more than 1,500 years ago, during the reign of the Anuradhapura kingdom, long before mechanical calendars, long before Galileo's telescopes or Kepler's laws. And yet, when you superimpose lunar cycle data on a high-resolution scan of the most intact moonstone, one located at the base of the Mahavihara temple, the overlaps are unsettling. The 4 animals correspond to 4 planetary conjunctions visible with the naked eye. The swan count matches the number of full moons in a solar year. The lotus petals echo the pattern of lunar eclipses across a Saros cycle. Could they have known this? Could ancient Sri Lankan architects have encoded a celestial calculator into a stone threshold, something millions step across without realizing what lies beneath? Many archaeologists scoff at the theory. They call it overinterpretation, pattern seeking. But even the skeptics agree on one thing: the craftsmanship is flawless. These moonstones were not random, they were planned, measured and carved with a precision that borders on obsessive. And then, there's the mystery of the lost central ring. Some early drawings made by British colonial surveyors in the 1800s show a sixth inner band on some moonstones. A circle now worn smooth, eroded into near nothing. What was it? No one knows. Some say it was simply the platform itself. Others believe it may have held metal inlays removed long ago, perhaps etched with inscriptions, runes, or star maps now lost. There's also the question of placement. Moonstones are found at only one specific spot, the base of staircases, always facing the same direction, and always placed in line with the temple's inner chamber. It's not just decoration, it's orientation, it's alignment. Every moonstone seems to point, like a compass needle, toward a spiritual or symbolic center. Could this have been intentional? Perhaps it was meant to condition the mind before entering a sacred space. You'd step across the outer chaos, the beasts, the vines, and approach the peaceful lotus with every footstep, a symbolic shedding of ego, a psychological shift, a purification of thought. Or maybe it was mathematical. Maybe the position helped track lunar shadows as they moved across the temple courtyard. Maybe priests watched the light slide across the stone to mark solstices or equinoxes. Then there are the legends. Local folklore says that one particular moonstone, now broken and forgotten in a village far to the south, could predict the future, that when water is poured across it during the monsoon, one animal rises in the reflection first, and that animal reveals what kind of year it will be. Crops, war, disease, wealth, whether it's true or not, no one knows. But villagers still pour water every April, just to be sure. The truth is, we've forgotten more than we remember. Moonstones were once common across Sri Lanka, at temple thresholds, palace gates, monastery entrances. Now, many are cracked, weathered, fenced off behind rusted metal gates. You could walk past one and never see it, but if you do, if you stop, if you listen, it will whisper. Because the moonstone isn't just a rock, it's a riddle, a key, a whisper from a civilization that saw the stars not as distant lights, but as something far more intimate, something you could step across every day, barefoot on the way to prayer. Tibet's permafrost mummies. High in the Himalayan wilderness, where the air grows thin and the silence settles like snow, there are places where time no longer moves forward. The wind hums low across stone and ice, and even the sun, in those upper altitudes, seems to shine differently, pale, distant, reverent. This is Tibet, land of sky burials, prayer flags, and ancient whispers lost beneath layers of frost, and deep within its frozen earth, something unexpected has begun to emerge. In 2008, not far from the Changtong Plateau, one of the most remote and inhospitable regions on the planet, a team of researchers stumbled upon something strange while studying permafrost erosion. A series of rocks had shifted in an unusual pattern, and beneath them, layers of ice gleamed unnaturally smooth. At first they thought it was just geological, but then they saw the hand. Dark, thin, leathery, reaching out from the permafrost. What they had discovered was a burial, but not just any burial. A body, human, perfectly preserved in the cold earth. Not wrapped, not burned, not entombed, just laid in the ice, as if the earth itself had taken it in gently and kept it still, and it wasn't alone. Over the next 3 weeks, with painstaking care, the researchers uncovered 4 more bodies, all male, all remarkably intact. Their skin had taken on a darkened hue from centuries of frozen mineral exposure. But their features, eyelashes, fingernails, even tattoos, remained eerily clear. This wasn't a modern tragedy, or the remains of lost mountaineers. The carbon dating was precise, over 1,500 years old, centuries before Tibetan Buddhism flourished in the region. A time of fragmented kingdoms, warring tribes, and whispered rituals. But what stunned archaeologists was the manner of the burial. There were no coffins, no tomb structures, just stone-lined troughs carved into permafrost with the bodies laid on woven mats. Some clutched smooth stones in their hands. Others had fragments of what looked like animal hide pouches, and all of them faced east toward the rising sun. Was this a burial tradition? A spiritual journey frozen in time? The bodies weren't mummified by intent. They weren't embalmed or smoked or dried in the sun. They had simply frozen, but frozen so well that even traces of stomach contents remained. Barley, yak milk, bitter herbs. Had they died peacefully? Were they sacrificed? And why here? So high, so isolated, so hidden from the world. The region where they were found had no records of settlement from that era. No known villages, no mapped trails, just stone, ice, and wind. Which begs the question, why bring the dead all the way here? One theory suggests that these were spiritual ascetics, early practitioners of pre-Buddhist Bon religion, shamans perhaps, or monks from a forgotten sect who believed that the higher the body was placed, the closer it would be to the divine after death. In Bon tradition, the soul must navigate harsh spiritual landscapes after death. Maybe this frozen land mirrored that, but others have a darker theory. Some researchers, studying pollen grains found near the burial site, discovered traces of high-altitude fungal spores, spores known to cause disorientation and hallucinations. Could these men have been part of a ritual exodus? A group sent out to the mountains in a trance-like state, offering themselves to the gods or spirits of the highlands. Were they pilgrims or offerings? Then there's the truly strange detail. Each of the men had a small hole in the same place, the back of the skull, right near the base. Not large, barely the width of a pencil. No signs of violence, no signs of trauma, as if something had been inserted or removed post-mortem. A ceremonial practice, a way of releasing the soul, as described in certain Siberian shamanic traditions. The holes don't match any known burial customs in the region. Not Buddhist, not Bon, not tribal. They're unique, and no one has ever found similar ones in any other frozen burial, which raises the possibility. Could this have been a forgotten culture? A group lost to time, whose only remaining traces lie frozen beneath the permafrost. As more thawing occurs across the Tibetan plateau, new sites have begun to surface. In 2019, another body, female this time, was found further west. She wore a delicate necklace of bone and turquoise, and her body bore traces of ochre paint. Her fingers were curled as if in prayer. Are these part of the same tradition, or a different one altogether? Tibet has always held its secrets tightly. Beneath the chants, beneath the monasteries, beneath the snow lies a world we're only beginning to uncover. These mummies, so quietly preserved, challenge what we thought we knew about ancient Himalayan life, about spirituality, about death. Some researchers now call the site the Silent Necropolis, a frozen archive of a forgotten way of honoring the dead. But perhaps it's more than that. Perhaps it's not a graveyard, but a gateway, a place where the physical world ends and the spirit begins, a place where the living came to surrender their dead, not to the soil, but to the sky. The ice holds no answers, only questions, and the more it melts, the louder those questions become. Who were they? Why here? And what did they see in those final moments beneath the endless Himalayan stars? Zambia's Echo Tongue Monument. In the heart of Zambia, where the savanna meets the shadowy Miumbo woodlands, and ancient stories still cling to the stones like dew to leaves, there stands a monument that shouldn't exist, a tongue made of stone. Not a statue, not a symbol, not something you'd expect to find out here. Just a curved, rising formation, sleek like polished granite, shaped unmistakably like a human tongue, mid-speech. Long and flat, then rising gently at the end, as though caught in the act of whispering something sacred. Locals call it the echo tongue, because if you speak into it softly, slowly, with respect, it speaks back. But what it says, no one truly knows. It was discovered, at least by science in the 1980s, by a British linguist traveling through southern Zambia to study tribal phonetics. He wasn't looking for anything historical, but when he wandered into the Choma district with a Lozi guide, His recording equipment began picking up faint harmonic reflections. He thought it was interference, until he removed his headset and heard it with his own ears. He had spoken a simple phrase, just a greeting, but seconds later, the sound returned, not as a flat echo, but with tone, a layered tonal response, as if the rock had chewed the sound and sent it back changed. It was the guide who stopped and stared, not at the sound, but at the formation itself. There, just past the clearing, among scattered boulders, stood the tongue. Nobody had documented it before. No formal records, no surveys. Yet locals had legends about it. In one tale, passed down by Lozi elders, the monument was said to be the tongue of the earth spirit, frozen in stone after it tried to warn the ancestors of a great fire in the sky. In another version, it was a cursed oracle, punished by the gods for speaking too much truth, now doomed to repeat only what others say. The science, of course, tells a simpler story. Geologists who later visited the site noted the peculiar curvature of the surrounding rock formations. The granite in this region is dense and smooth, shaped over millions of years by wind, heat, and pressure. The tongue itself sits at the center of a shallow bowl, like a natural amphitheater. If you speak while standing at a specific distance, just about 2.3 meters, the sound reverberates along the base and reflects upward, amplified in subtle harmonics. But what science didn't expect was that every language sounds different when echoed by the stone. Researchers tried Bemba, Lozi, English, even Mandarin. Each time the echo returned not just louder but altered. It seemed to mimic the tone and structure of the original speech, like a stone interpreting sound. English came back crisper. Bemba sounded almost melodic. But when one linguist tried tonal clicking, a Khoisan-inspired pattern, the echo stuttered, stopped, and then returned with a chilling whistle, one that no one had uttered. That was the first time someone referred to the site not as a natural wonder, but as a machine. Could it be that the echo tongue was shaped, not by nature, but by design? Across Africa, there are megalithic sites whose purpose remains unknown. The Great Zimbabwe ruins, the Namaratunga stones in Kenya, possibly a calendar, the geometric carved stones of Sudan. Could the echo tongue be a forgotten relic of a once advanced culture, one that studied acoustics, vibration, and frequency? Some suggest the tongue is part of something larger. Satellite imaging shows unusual subsurface density beneath the formation, like a hollow chamber or a tunnel system, but no formal excavations have taken place. Locals warn against it. They say the stone must not be disturbed, that it is not simply an object, but a being, a memory frozen in rock, that the echo it returns is not sound, but a voice it remembers. And still visitors come, whispering songs, names, secrets into the stone's edge. Some say the tongue never repeats the same sound twice. Others say it speaks only when you ask the right question. In 2015, a sound archaeologist from Sweden tried a new method. Instead of speech, he played harmonic tones using a tuning fork, and as the vibrations met the tongue's surface, they returned in a completely different key, one that matched a scale no longer in use in any known music tradition. Not Western, not African, something older, something forgotten. So what is it? A strange fluke of natural acoustics, or an intentional instrument designed by minds who understood sound, not just as vibration, but as language? Was it a tool for ceremony, for healing, for communication, or was it never meant for us at all? As the sun sets over the plains of southern Zambia, the tongue glows faintly gold under the dying light. The wind hushes, and the air grows still, and if you step quietly, respectfully, to its base, and say nothing at all, sometimes it still speaks, not with words, but with sound. Gabon's stone drum circle, deep within the emerald jungles of Gabon, past the groves where vines wrap trees like ancient ropes and bird calls echo through the mist, lies a place so quiet it feels like the forest is holding its breath. There, amid ferns and fallen leaves, sits a circle of stone, not jagged, not chaotic, but deliberate, drum-shaped, symmetrical, arranged, stone by stone, placed with intention, dozens of them, each about waist high, with flat tops and carved indentations along the sides. Some are smooth, some are pitted, some resonate when struck, like ceramic bells trapped in stone bodies. They call it the stone drum circle of Gabon, and no one can explain who made it, or why. The site first drew attention in the 1940s, when French botanists trekking the dense rainforest stumbled upon the clearing. They weren't archaeologists. They weren't even looking for ruins, but the uniformity of the stones, the way they stood in a circle, perfectly spaced, felt impossible to ignore. Were they natural formations? Ancient seats? Grave markers? But then one of the men, out of curiosity, struck the stone with the base of his walking stick, and the rock rang. Not loudly, not with a metallic chime, but with a soft, hollow hum. A pulse, low and long, like a deep breath trapped inside granite. That's when people began to wonder, were these stones meant to be played? The site, located just west of the Ogooué River basin, soon became a quiet fascination for researchers. Not many, mind you. The jungle was too thick, too remote. But those who ventured in found something strange. Each stone responded to touch differently. Some gave a warm, woody tone, others a brittle knock. A few produced 2 or even 3 distinct notes depending on where they were struck. And most peculiar of all, none of them were made of local stone. The rocks, igneous and heavy, had likely been brought from kilometers away, hauled somehow over jungle floor, past ravines and rivers, to this very spot. But for what purpose? Local tribes had mixed reactions. Some elders spoke of the site as sacred, a place that had been off limits for generations. Others said their ancestors used to perform rituals there, dances to awaken the forest spirits. But no tribe claimed to have built the circle. They all agreed on one thing, though. The stones were not just rocks, they were voices. Over time, acoustic researchers began to take interest. They ran sound wave tests, mapped vibration patterns, even tried to recreate the tones using cast models. And what they found was puzzling. Some of the stones had internal fissures that amplified sound. Others had been hollowed slightly from beneath, in ways that could not have happened naturally. And the wear patterns on top, they weren't erosion, they were impact rings. Indentations consistent with thousands, maybe millions of soft strikes, like mallets had been used, over and over for years. The stones, in other words, were not just playable. They had been played, but what were they used for? One theory proposes the site was a kind of ancient sound map, a musical terrain used for ritual, perhaps to communicate with distant tribes through rhythmic drumming. Another posits the circle acted as a healing chamber, where sonic frequencies were used to treat ailments, in a way not unlike Tibetan singing bowls. A third, more controversial theory suggests the drums were part of a coded language that rhythmic patterns carved into the stones, combined with their sound signatures, might represent an early form of symbolic communication, a drum language etched into geology. Still, others say it's simpler than all that. Maybe it was just a place to gather, to drum, to dance, to be human in the jungle. But here's what really captures the imagination. In 2008, a team brought in a trained percussionist, blindfolded him, and had him tap each stone, one by one, with soft mallets. He'd never seen the circle before. He had no prior knowledge of the site, and yet, without instruction, without hesitation, he played a melody, a pattern, one that spiraled inward, from stone to stone, like he'd known the music all along. Was it instinct, coincidence, or did the stones themselves guide him? No written records exist. No tools have ever been found at the site. No bones, no ashes, no offerings, just the jungle, the quiet, and the stones. But even now, if you travel there and sit in the center of the circle during the early morning mist, you can still hear it. Not music, but something close, a low hum, rising from the earth, echoing through stone, as if the forest remembers, as if the drums still wait for someone who knows how to listen. UAE's sandstone eclipse entry. In the vast sun-bleached sands of the United Arab Emirates, where dunes drift like golden waves and wind moves without sound, there exists a structure that most have never heard of. It isn't tall, it isn't grand, it's just a low sandstone temple, half buried, half forgotten, standing quietly at the edge of the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter. But what it lacks in size, it makes up for in precision, in mystery, in purpose. Because once every 18 years, during a very specific moment, a shaft of light enters through the temple's stone gate. and it does something extraordinary. It travels, silently and perfectly, through the interior corridor, brushing across one wall, then striking a tiny circle carved into the floor. A circle no wider than a coin. It is a moment of alignment so precise, so timed, that modern scientists first assumed it was a coincidence. But it's not. It happens only during a solar eclipse, and only when the eclipse begins at a specific angle in the sky. This temple was built to catch an eclipse. Archaeologists didn't even know it existed until 2006, when a sandstorm stripped back the upper layer of the dune and revealed its sandstone blocks. At first glance, it looked like an old Bedouin rest stop, maybe a grain store. Nothing special, but then they noticed the geometry. The entry arch faced neither north nor east, but was tilted in a strange, deliberate angle, almost wrong by compass standards. The interior corridor wasn't central. It curved. The stonework, though weathered, had grooves and lines carved into it that seemed oddly mathematical. It wasn't just a structure, it was a machine, a solar instrument, a chamber built not for gods or kings, but for light. The UAE isn't typically known for ancient ruins. Its sands have swallowed and erased much of what came before, but this site, later named the Sandstone Eclipse Entry by researchers, forced a reconsideration. How could a civilization with no written history, no visible tools, and no surviving records build a temple that could predict and capture a solar eclipse? Not with luck, not with chance, with knowledge. Inside the chamber, archaeologists found a series of grooves etched along the wall. At first they seemed random, but a physicist from Abu Dhabi University recognized the pattern. Saros cycles, the repeated 18-year, 11-day period after which nearly identical solar eclipses occur. Somehow, whoever built the temple had tracked eclipses long enough to notice the rhythm, the return, the celestial clockwork, and then they built around it. The carving in the floor, the coin-sized circle, is not just decoration. It's made of a darker stone, likely basalt, and polished so smooth that it still reflects faint light. When the solar eclipse begins, the sun's beams slip through a slit in the doorway, curve slightly due to the angled corridor, and land perfectly on that circle. Not beside it, not around it, on it, and for just a few seconds, it glows, as if the stone itself remembers the sky. Then, darkness, then silence, and the light is gone. What does it mean? Some say it was a calendar, marking time for a people who lived beyond time. Others believe it was ritualistic, a sacred event where tribes would gather every few decades to witness the moment when the heavens touched the earth. But some go further. They say the stone circle isn't just symbolic. They believe it once held something, a relic, a crystal, a seed, a lens, something that only worked during the eclipse. Perhaps it amplified the moment, or absorbed it, or offered a glimpse into something not meant for ordinary eyes. But the truth is, we don't know. No writings, no bones, no tools, no offerings, only this, a chamber, a shadow, a circle of stone, and the light that finds it every 18 years. Today, the UAE government has secured the site. It's rarely shown to the public, and photographs are limited, not because of secrecy, but because the moment, the real one, can't be captured on camera. You can't film the hush of the wind as the light slips down the corridor. You can't record the feeling when that beam lands exactly where it's supposed to, as if it always knew how to return. You can only be there, silent, watching, and wondering. Who built this? Why? And how did they know? Cambodia's Stupa Sound Mirror Room, somewhere deep in Cambodia, beyond the well-worn trails and centuries-old ruins that draw pilgrims and tourists alike, stands a weathered stone stupa unremarkable to the untrained eye. Its base is moss-covered. The bricks are aged by time and monsoon rains. Monks from a nearby monastery still light incense here. They chant, they meditate, and they leave quietly. They don't speak of what lies sealed beneath. Not anymore. You wouldn't know it walking by. There are no signs, no plaques, but local oral histories remember something hidden, whispered from one generation to the next. Beneath the structure, they say, is a chamber that listens, a room built to remember voices, a space where secrets linger, and in 2007, a restoration team got a little closer to that truth. They weren't searching for mysteries, just stabilizing a cracked foundation, but when one of the foundation stones shifted slightly out of place, the echo it produced was strange, too long, too clean. Not what you'd expect from a small hollow beneath the floor. They tapped the stone again, and then again. Someone lowered a microphone. The sound bounced back in waves, layered like a quiet chorus. The stupa was built in the late 12th century, possibly during the reign of Jayavarman VII. Like so many Khmer constructions, its architecture is deeply symbolic, layered, precise, aligned with the stars. But this chamber beneath it wasn't in any blueprint, wasn't mentioned in any religious texts. And yet, when archaeologists got permission to investigate, they found an access point behind a false brick wall. A narrow passage led downward into a sealed cavity carved from sandstone. And that's where the mystery truly began. It's a nearly perfect oval, 12 feet across, with smooth walls that curve inward like the inside of a massive egg. No inscriptions, no statues, just silence, but not ordinary silence, an engineered one. Because when one of the researchers whispered a word, the sound didn't just echo, it returned. Not loudly but softly, like it had been caught and gently reflected back. What kind of ancient engineering could do that? Sound engineers called in later ran tests. They measured how certain frequencies responded to the room's shape, and they found something baffling. The acoustics were more advanced than expected, matched only by structures designed in the last century with precision digital modeling. Whispers carried across the chamber as if you were standing inches apart. Words spoken from opposite ends overlapped with eerie clarity, and it wasn't accidental. The stone walls hadn't just been carved, they'd been subtly curved. Each surface reflected sound waves with mathematical intention. A whisper spoken into one end reached the other at almost the same pitch and volume, provided the speaker stood in just the right spot. They called it the mirror point. From there, everything said could be heard clearly by anyone else standing at the far end. But it gets stranger. The chamber has a distinct resonance frequency. When a person recites a mantra or hums in a certain pitch range, the entire space begins to subtly vibrate. It doesn't shake, it hums. A long, low, bone-deep hum. Not loud, not jarring, but enough to feel in your chest. Some said it was like standing inside a singing bowl. What purpose could this room have served? Some believe it was used for rituals, perhaps a kind of acoustic meditation chamber. The mirror point could have acted as a position of authority, where a high monk or priest would speak, and the sound would reach every initiate with equal clarity, no matter where they stood. Others think it was something more mystical, a sacred listening room, a place where prayers were preserved not on stone or paper, but in resonance. Even more curiously, when early researchers reviewed sound tests, they noted faint echoes in recordings where no one had spoken. One audio technician claimed to hear fragments of old Khmer phrases in the background, as if the walls were releasing long-trapped voices. Others dismissed it as auditory pareidolia, the brain making sense of echoes. Still, it unsettled the team enough that they stopped the experiments after just a few days. The government closed the site shortly after, not for preservation, but due to what they called unexplained phenomena. The chamber was sealed again, access restricted. Even the monks now refer to it only with reverence and caution. They light candles outside, not inside, and if you ask them what the room was, they'll just say it remembers, and that idea that a room could remember sound has haunted acousticians and archaeologists ever since. How did ancient Khmer builders create such a perfect acoustic shape without any known mathematical models for sound? Why did they hide it? Why wasn't it part of public rituals? And who was meant to listen to whom? Was it just a meditative space, or a confessional vault? Could it have been something entirely different? A machine of spiritual resonance designed to transmit intention across dimensions we barely understand? Or was it simply a temple beneath a temple, where silence, shaped by stone, became the medium for memory? The chamber still exists, though few have seen it in the last decade. It rests beneath that unassuming stupa. No plaque marks the entrance. No crowd gathers at the base. Only the wind moves across the steps now, stirring the leaves that have settled in the cracks. But sometimes, Just sometimes, if you stand very quietly near the center during monsoon season, when the wind hits the bricks at the right angle, you might hear a sound carried from below, not quite a whisper, not quite a voice, just something returning. Canada's ice-encased totem circle. Far north in Canada, beyond the reach of most roads, where the ice doesn't just fall in winter, it settles in layers that take centuries to melt. There lies a forgotten valley, tucked between shifting glaciers and hidden by snowfall for most of the year. It wasn't marked on modern maps until a satellite survey in the early 2000s picked up something strange, a near-perfect circle of vertical forms peeking out of the ice, like teeth breaking the surface of a frozen sea. It wasn't a logging site, it wasn't modern, and no one could figure out how it got there. By 2004, a small exploratory team from a remote university made the trek. What they found left them speechless. Carved poles, tomic in design, spaced with deliberate rhythm, not weathered or fallen. Standing, frozen waist-deep in clear glacial ice, as if someone had arranged them in ceremony and the world had simply forgotten to come back. Each pole told a story, not through written language, but through patterns, faces, animals, ravens, wolves, bears, the crests of old lineages. But the material cedar was not native to the valley. It would have had to be carried there, hundreds of miles, and no local indigenous nations claimed them. The carvers were unknown, the meanings lost. Oral traditions spoke of ancient migrations, of ceremonial circles built far from permanent villages for spiritual journeys, where the sky and silence were the only witnesses, but none remembered a circle frozen in a place so remote, so harsh, so perfectly preserved by nature. What puzzled archaeologists most wasn't just the location, it was the preservation. The poles were too intact. No moss, no decay, just ice. It was as if the glacial flow had paused to keep them. Carbon testing placed the poles around 1400 CE, but their style, their technique, didn't fully match the known groups of the northwest coast. It was like a forgotten dialect of the same visual language, familiar but distinctly other. Were they early pilgrims from a lost band, nomads carving in solitude, or did the valley itself hold meaning we've long forgotten? The arrangement of the poles formed a near-perfect circle, 42 feet wide. At its center, nothing, just a depression in the ice. Some thought it was ceremonial. Others said it was a place where someone, something stood. The alignments matched solar patterns. On solstice mornings, the rising sun would pierce the circle just so, lighting the central void. Was this a spiritual compass, a calendar, a stage? One hypothesis suggests it was used for dream journeys, a place where elders came not to speak, but to listen, where the sky, the cold, and the shape of the land brought visions. But no firm evidence ever surfaced. No tools, no bones, no campsite, just the circle. Over the next decade, the glacier began to shift. The poles were removed for preservation. They're stored now, carefully cataloged and housed in temperature-controlled rooms, hundreds of miles from where they stood for centuries. But something was lost in the move. The silence, the sense of being watched, not by people, but by memory itself. The circle was more than wood. It was time, trapped in ice, and those who saw it, who stood in the middle with the wind against their coat and the sky stretched wide overhead, said the same thing. It felt like standing in a memory, not your own, but someone else's, older, wiser, forgotten. Korea's Bronze Age rhythm walls. High in the misty hills of the Korean peninsula, where the wind doesn't howl but hums in slow, deliberate whispers. Archaeologists came upon something that didn't quite fit. It wasn't a city, it wasn't a shrine. It was a line of stones, masonry, but not for fortification, not for shelter, and not for keeping anything out. This wall wasn't solid. It was full of holes. Each stone slab, upright and shoulder-high, was carved with deep perforations, almost like a flute laid on its side, built into the landscape. Some holes were large, wide enough to fit a fist. Others were narrow, more like the neck of a jar, but they all ran in precise, repeating patterns, up, down, across, stone after stone, a rhythmic language of emptiness. Locals had walked past the wall for years, assuming it was the remnant of a forgotten structure, maybe a collapsed temple, maybe part of an old defense system. But none of it made sense. There were no adjoining ruins, no gates, no roofs. Just this wall, stretching gently along the curve of a forested ridge. It wasn't until an unusually windy spring that someone noticed what made it different. As gusts swept through the hills, they passed through the wall's carved holes, and the wall sang. Not music, not a melody, but tones rising and falling in harmony with the wind's speed. The holes weren't random, they were tuned. The sound wasn't loud, you wouldn't hear it from afar, but if you stood nearby, especially at dawn or dusk, you'd hear a gentle, breath-like hum as the air moved through each opening, vibrating stone like a natural instrument. Some described it like a bamboo flute being played far off in a forest. Others said it was like whispers, speaking without words. This was an accident. Bronze Age artifacts found nearby suggest the wall dates back more than 3,000 years, well before formal written history in the region. Tools, shards, ceremonial bronze blades, signs that this was once a place of meaning. But who built it, and why carve sound into stone? Researchers studying the acoustic properties proposed a theory. The wall may have served as a sound walk, an ancient auditory pathway, not built to contain but to guide, to offer a sonic experience as one passed by. In certain weather conditions, different parts of the wall emit distinct tones, depending on the wind's strength and direction. Walking along the wall, you don't just hear sound, you move with it. Maybe it was a ritual path, maybe it marked time, or seasons, or breath, and maybe, just maybe, it was a meditation, a slow journey guided not by sight, but by sound, where the wind carried memory, and stone remembered music. Some have suggested a connection to shamanic practices, ceremonies where nature and spirit were intertwined. The wall could have served as a threshold between seen and unseen, a place where you walked not into a building, but into a state of mind. Today the wall remains, quiet, mostly untouched. On still days, it's just a wall. But when the wind returns, when it rushes low through the trees and finds those holes, you can still hear it. The hum, the breath, the rhythm, a song without a singer, a memory carved in stone, and a question that lingers in the air. Nepal's honeycomb monks' caves. Far above Nepal's winding valley roads, beyond the reach of the everyday world, the mountain air thins and prayer flags flutter like colored whispers against the sky. There, carved into a sheer cliff face, lies a hidden wonder, a honeycomb of perfectly square niches, each carefully etched by hands long gone. Imagine the scene. Hundreds of womb-like cavities arranged in precise grid, each just large enough for a person to sit, gazing eastward over the valley as the first light of morning dances across the rock. The place seems impossible, yet there it stands, silent, timeless, and deeply mysterious. When mountaineering geologists first surveyed the site in the 1980s, they counted 628 niches, each about 1 meter deep and wide, identical in size and perfectly aligned. No inscriptions, no tools, no clear signs of habitation, just empty rooms carved into solid rock. How did people reach such heights to carve these? And why? Each niche took skilled carvers days to complete, yet no traces of camps, gradual wear, or abandonment remain. It's as though the cliff itself was the construction site, the sky its only ceiling. The prevailing theory suggests these were meditation retreats, vertical cells for monks seeking silence and solitude. Each niche facing dawn, each breath in sync with the sun's rise, each gaze turned toward a spiritual horizon. But as engineers later measured the acoustics, they found something even more remarkable. When the monsoon winds sweep across the cliff, they enter certain niches and produce low-frequency hums and subtle tones. Whisper a word in one, and your voice lingers, echoing softly back as if carried through some ancient resonance chamber in the stone. Some niches hold deeper hums, others produce gentle reverberation. In the right wind, a single mantra chanted in one niche will resonate through hundreds, an invisible shared acoustic tapestry. Some researchers describe the effect as standing inside a giant singing bowl carved by nature and faith. Could these cave cells be not just retreats, but energy harps, musical offerings to the mountain and the sky? At dawn, sunlight glints across the cliff, raking along rows of niches in slow succession as the sun climbs higher. During equinoxes, the light travels down the deepest rows, fleeting shafts of sun that might have marked seasonal cycles. Heat and wind readings suggest these niches form a natural calendar, one measured not in days but in light, sound, and breath. Were monks charting time this way, feeling the rhythms of earth and sky rather than measuring them? Local legends whisper about the silent wind monks, who would climb into these cells and remain for weeks in contemplative solitude. A story tells of one monk who emerged after 40 days, claiming he had heard the heartbeat of the mountain itself. In these niches, it seems, sound is more than pressure waves, it is memory held in stone. In 2018, a recorded experiment using tuning forks placed within the niches stunned sound researchers. Harmonics emerged, rising and falling across adjacent cavities, as if the cliff itself was singing. The recordings were eerie, soft, undulating tones that wove through the air like slow-moving currents. Though scientists eventually spoke cautiously, the effect lingered in folklore and online curiosity. Pilgrims and students began visiting, carrying silent hopes of hearing the mountain breathe. Even now, if you approach the cliff at dusk when the wind mellows and the valley exhales, sit near a niche and cup your ear. What you'll hear is not voices, not language, but something deeper, a quiet resonance that shifts with the breeze, a breath in the stone, a reminder that echo can be alive in absence. What remains unanswered? Were the niches carved all at once or added over centuries? Did they serve distinct functions, some for meditation, others for ritual, others for sound healing? Was there a master plan, a blueprint, or did generations of seekers contribute slowly, cell by cell, adding to the grid? What spiritual practices guided the choice of location, the orientation, the size of each chamber? And is this site unique, or are there other honeycomb niches in the Himalayan spine waiting quietly beneath snow to be discovered? As twilight deepens and shadows reclaim each hollow, you can almost feel presence lurking behind the stone, not just from those who carved and sat here, but from the mountain itself. There's a memory in these niches, a sonic archive of breath and intention, energy and silence, humanity intertwined with geology. And until the wind stops and the earth holds its breath, you can still sit, listen, and feel it, the resonance of memory, wrapped in stone, waiting for someone to hear it. Uzbekistan's Star Shadow Courtyard. A sunken courtyard where star shadows align at equinox, astronomical stage in the desert. In the wide golden stretches of Uzbekistan's southern desert, where the horizon trembles in the heat and the earth holds more silence than sound, lies something ancient, something forgotten, half erased by wind and dust, but not by purpose. Buried just below the shifting sands, archaeologists uncovered an arrangement of carved stone unlike anything they had seen in the region. It wasn't a temple or a tomb. There were no walls left standing, no statues or scripts, just an open courtyard, slightly sunken into the earth, as if the land had been pressed down with intent, and along its edges, stones, placed in a pattern, quiet and deliberate. It would have looked like nothing to most, just another ruin, flattened by centuries of wind, until the shadows came. The courtyard was first documented in the early 1990s, during a Soviet-led expedition, surveying ancient caravan routes in the Bukhara region. Initially, it appeared as a shallow depression in the earth, about 25 meters across, ringed by half-buried stone blocks. No inscriptions, no artifacts. But when they returned again, near the spring equinox, a curious thing happened. At exactly midday, under the high desert sun, shadows from 3 tall standing stones fell across the courtyard floor, intersecting with a set of etched lines. One shadow landed directly on a carved star. Another reached across the courtyard to a triangle carved into the opposite wall. And the third landed nowhere, not until the autumn equinox, 6 months later, when it pointed to the same star, now reversed. This place, it seemed, was watching the sky. Over time, Excavation revealed more. The central courtyard was precisely aligned with cardinal directions, with radial grooves carved into the stone floor like the spokes of a wheel. The perimeter had 12 subtle indentations, matching lunar cycles, or the zodiac perhaps. But it wasn't just symbolic. At certain times of the year, when stars rose just before dawn, their light would align with channels cut into the sandstone. Reflections off polished stone fragments, still embedded in the eastern edge, would direct the faint glow toward the center. This wasn't simply a place to observe, it was a stage built for the cosmos, a ritual space aligned not only with the sun, but with stars timed to equinoxes and solstices. It had no roof. It needed none. The ceiling was the sky. But the question that continues to puzzle researchers is not how, but who. There are no cities nearby, no inscriptions to link the courtyard with known empires like the Sogdians or the Persians. Pottery fragments found in the area suggest it may date back as far as 1200 BCE, making it far older than most of the region's written history. So what kind of civilization, long before high towers and walled cities, spent years constructing a space designed only to interact with light and shadow? Some archaeologists believe it was a nomadic stargazing culture, one that left few traces but used oral tradition and star maps to pass down knowledge. Others wonder if this courtyard was a fragment of a once larger observatory, swallowed by the sand. What they do agree on is this: the placement of the stones, the carvings, and especially the equinox shadow paths, are too precise to be accidental. In a world where time was tracked by sun and star, the courtyard may have served as both calendar and compass. Equinoxes marked planting and harvest. Star alignments may have guided journeys or rituals. Standing at its center today, under that same unbroken sky, you feel the pull of purpose in the stones. As the sun rises behind you, light and shadow dance exactly as they did 3,000 years ago. And in that stillness you wonder, not just what they were watching, but who they thought might be watching back. Norway's midnight sun cairns. Stone cairns aligned to reflect midnight sun markers for solstice ceremonies in the far north. Far above the Arctic Circle, where the sun sometimes never sets and the landscape rolls in quiet tones of gray and gold, there are stones. Not grand monuments, not towering statues, just stacks. Cairns, quietly perched on ridges, nestled into rocky outcrops, or standing silently on the edge of the tundra. They look like nothing at first, piles of stone, weathered, leaning, as if made by the wind itself. But here in northern Norway, during the height of midsummer, something remarkable happens. When the midnight sun hangs low but never dips beneath the horizon, some of these cairns catch the light, not randomly, but precisely. Their placement, their angles, the way they face, it's deliberate. They glow when all else dims. It's as if the land is remembering. These cairns have always existed in the local landscape, known to reindeer herders and fishermen, passed by silently for centuries. Some believe they were wayfinding markers, others memorials. But in 2015, a team of researchers from Tromsø Arctic University began surveying these ancient markers under unique conditions, not during the day, but at midnight. Specifically, on the days leading up to and following the summer solstice, what they found was subtle but stunning. Dozens of cairns spread across mountaintops and coastal cliffs were positioned to align with the movement of the sun at midnight. On the longest days of the year, light from the horizon pierced through gaps in the stones, or hit their faces squarely, illuminating the cairns, while the rest of the landscape lay in a golden half-glow. It wasn't luck. It was memory coded in rock. Some cairns are no more than waist high, but others rise over 2 meters, with flat stone caps balanced carefully on top. Their construction is layered, like they were designed not just to last, but to interact with light in very specific ways. Archaeologists studying their layout noticed patterns. Lines drawn from one cairn to another matched the arc of the sun's movement during the solstice. Some cairns formed triangles, or arcs themselves, shaped like ancient sundials, tracking not the hours of a single day, but the dance of light across the entire nightless sky. One cairn, perched alone on a sea-facing cliff, casts a long shadow that points inland, straight toward another cairn hidden in the fjord hills. On midsummer's night, the light touches both. These aren't just stacks of rock, they're memory machines. What were these alignments used for? Local Sami traditions speak of solstice gatherings, ceremonies to honor the sun, the seasons, and the spirits of the land. While most of the detailed practices were lost during forced assimilation in the 19th and 20th centuries, echoes remain in oral stories of dances that followed the light, of songs sung to the rhythm of twilight, of watching the sky for the exact moment when the sun would hover, motionless, before slowly rising again. Perhaps the cairns were part of these rituals, not as temples, but as markers, like celestial tuning forks set into the land. When the light hit just right, the gathering could begin. Chile's magnetic stone pathway. Stones with magnetic anomalies aligned along a ridge. Ritual magnetism or natural marvel. High in the dry Andes of northern Chile, where the wind moves unbroken across the salt plains and the silence hangs heavy in the air, there's a ridge. From a distance it looks like any other, dusty, ochre-colored, and baked under the thin mountain sun. But when you walk it, when you move slowly over its path of weathered stones, something strange begins to happen. Your compass begins to twitch, not wildly, not like a machine gone mad, just gently, as if something beneath the earth were breathing. The path, barely noticeable at first, is a thin trail of stones that cuts across the ridge's crest. Some are no larger than a loaf of bread, others the size of a backpack. But all of them, every one seems placed, not scattered, not natural, aligned. Intentionally, they stretch on for nearly half a kilometer, gently curving, gently sloping, and many of them are magnetic. The first reports came in 2009, when a pair of amateur hikers, attempting to follow pre-Incan trails above the Atacama Basin, noticed something unusual. Their GPS readings were inconsistent along a ridge trail. Compasses spun slowly, then froze. Phones rebooted. It was nothing violent. No radiation, no threat. But it was off. Curious, they contacted a geophysics lab in Santiago. Months later, a small survey team arrived with magnetometers and a drone. The data stunned them. The stones weren't just scattered. They formed a path, thin, snaking, and mostly straight, with certain segments spiking in magnetic readings far above background levels. And it wasn't the soil or mountain itself that carried the anomalies. It was the stones, just the stones, placed one after another, many showing signs of having been moved, cut even, who placed them, when, and more puzzling, why. The Atacama region is no stranger to mystery. It holds the driest non-polar desert on Earth, where mummies thousands of years old lie perfectly preserved. It's also home to petroglyphs, geoglyphs, and ancient ceremonial platforms from cultures like the Chinchorro and the Tiwanaku. Yet this path didn't match any known cultural style. There were no carvings, no walls, no offerings or graves. And the stones? Basaltic in part, yes, but some were igneous rocks, not native to that ridge. Several had to have been brought from many kilometers away, and most curiously, nearly half of the stones showed mild to moderate magnetic polarization. That's not something you see without heating them, or exposing them to high magnetic fields. Could an ancient people have known about these properties? Did they feel it somehow, in their hands, in their bones? Or did they choose the stones for reasons we've forgotten, with a wisdom we don't fully understand? One theory suggests the path was ceremonial, walked only on equinoxes or solstices, the magnetic stones chosen because of the way they felt underfoot. Some spiritual traditions speak of living stones, or of paths that wake the skin. Was this one such place? Another theory, more grounded but no less intriguing, is that the stones align with certain astronomical points. When plotted against the horizon, segments of the pathway align with the rising and setting sun on key solar dates, and with certain stars used by ancient desert navigators. But still, the magnetic mystery lingers. A few researchers propose the stones were struck by lightning in the distant past. Others believe it could be natural remanent magnetism trapped in the rocks by some long-forgotten volcanic process. But then, why were these rocks chosen and placed in a line? That's the part that resists explanation. It's not random. It's not scattered. It's designed. If you go there now, the pathway is almost invisible, unless you know where to look. You won't find signs, fences, or tourists. Just wind, just silence. The occasional condor wheeling high above. And if you walk it slowly, step by step, you might feel it too. That soft hum beneath your feet. That subtle pull in your compass. That feeling, hard to name, that you are tracing something ancient, something built not to be seen, but felt. And when you stand at its end, as the sun lowers against the Andes and paints the rocks gold, you might ask yourself, was this a trail for the feet, or was it a line drawn for the earth itself to remember? Guatemala's submerged jade statues. Beneath the still waters of Lake Adelon, in the highlands of Guatemala, there is a silence that feels almost deliberate. The surface glimmers with the reflection of cloud-capped volcanoes, untouched by time, their ancient shadows falling gently onto the waves. It's a place people visit for its beauty, but beneath that beauty, something far older rests. Divers in the early 2000s began to notice strange formations beneath the lake, flat stone platforms seemingly carved, not natural. Upon them, statues, jade statues, some cracked, some whole, many still upright, standing as if waiting. It didn't make sense at first. Lake Adelon is volcanic, deep, and shrouded in centuries of myth. But jade is sacred in Mesoamerican culture, used for burials, for kings, for gods. It's not something left behind easily, and certainly not something sunk beneath a lake, with no record. What began as a casual report from a free diver soon turned into a full archaeological dive mission, and what they found was quietly astonishing. Statues of carved green stone, shaped into humanoid figures, some seated, some appearing to stand in positions of reverence. Each was positioned on a low rectangular platform of stone, carefully leveled and spaced evenly apart, almost as if part of a procession. Some were simple. Others bore intricate designs on the chest, shoulders, or head. A few had facial expressions so detailed they seemed almost alive when lit by the divers' flashlights. Serene, watching, waiting. The first question was obvious. Why were they underwater? As the team surveyed more of the submerged area, they discovered signs that the water hadn't always covered this place. Remnants of old walls, foundation stones arranged in concentric rings, channels that looked like footpaths. At some point, maybe 1,000 years ago, maybe more, this area had been dry land. Locals had long passed down a story that beneath the lake were the ruins of a lost city. Some called it Samba. Others said it had no name, only that it sank one day when the earth cracked, and water flooded the valley. A punishment, they said, for a forgotten sin. Now with sonar imaging and underwater LiDAR, archaeologists mapped what looked like streets, plazas, and ceremonial platforms, stretching across what was once likely a lakeside ridge. And the jade statues, they weren't just tossed into the water or carried by landslides. They were placed carefully, intentionally, on raised stone beds. Some were even tied to small stone anchors, likely to keep them standing, unmoved. It raised questions no one could answer. Was this a burial, a farewell ritual to a sinking city, or was it the opposite, a gift to the lake itself? In Mayan culture, lakes were often viewed as portals to the underworld. The sacred cenotes of the Yucatan, for example, were places of offering. But Adelon is not a cenote. It's a deep volcanic basin, cold, ancient, and in its own way, more haunting. If these were offerings, they were like none found before. Jade, for the Maya, was more valuable than gold. To craft it took time, precision, knowledge of the stone's hardness, and fractures. These weren't crude effigies. Each statue represented work, skill, and devotion. And then there was the question of alignment. Several of the jade figures were found facing east, toward the sunrise over the San Pedro volcano. Others faced west, where the sun disappears behind the peaks at dusk. It suggests they weren't placed randomly. There was a logic, maybe even a ritual, and still, no writing, no glyphs, no names. Just the quiet watchfulness of stone eyes in a place where no humans walk anymore. The deeper the team explored, the stranger it got. One chamber formed by 4 perfectly cut walls, Bhutan's Dragon Tongue Rock, in the eastern reaches of Bhutan, where the mountains fold into quiet valleys, and the clouds often graze the hilltops, like slow-moving ghosts. There stands a curious formation, one not marked on most modern maps, not studied in major universities, but spoken of in low, reverent tones by locals. They call it the Dragon Tongue Rock. The name alone invites questions. What could a rock have to do with dragons? And why a tongue? It's not carved. It wasn't sculpted by ancient tools, or placed there by some historic temple project. No, this stone rises on its own, an oblong, smooth protrusion from the earth, shaped in a way that looks uncannily like a massive stone tongue flicking out from the hillside. If you stand before it in the right light, especially when mist rolls across the valley floor, you'd be forgiven for thinking some forgotten creature was speaking through the land itself. But what makes it even stranger is the belief surrounding it. The local monks, especially those from the nearby Lakang temple, perched just above the ridge, believe this stone tongue doesn't just resemble a dragon's mouth. It listens. It's said to taste the prayers whispered into the wind. Not hear, but taste. That distinction is important. Taste is a physical interaction, not just a metaphor for understanding. It implies something deeper, something more ancient. People don't come here in large numbers. There are no souvenir stands, no tour buses, no selfie sticks. Just the silence of the wind through the prayer flags and the quiet hum of insects in the grasses. But those who do find their way to the Dragon Tongue Rock often come with a specific purpose. They bring messages. Some whisper secrets. Others recite chants or family names. A few simply sit with their hands pressed to the rock, eyes closed, as if waiting for something in return. And sometimes they get it. One monk, an elder named Tashi, who has lived in the temple above for most of his adult life, told of a strange night decades ago. A storm had rolled in, heavy rain, the kind that turns mountain trails into rivers. He was sheltering beneath the monastery's edge when he heard it, a deep rumbling vibration that seemed to come not from the sky, but the earth itself. He followed it down to the Dragon Tongue Rock and found the stone glowing faintly, not visibly, but through a strange warmth, like heat radiating through fog. He placed his hand upon it. He claims that in that moment he felt, not heard, a voice. No words, just presence. A knowing, like the earth was remembering something with him, or through him. He never spoke of the details again. But from that night on, Tashi dedicated himself entirely to the stone, tending the trail that leads to it, guiding visitors who were sincere, and quietly turning away those who came only to gawk. Geologists have studied the area, of course. There's no scientific consensus. The rock is made of weathered quartzite, oddly smooth in some parts, cracked in others. Some say the protrusion is the result of millions of years of glacial erosion. Others believe it's a buried part of an older structure, maybe even a collapsed temple or pre-Buddhist shrine. But no tools were found, no inscriptions, just silence. And it's that silence that captures you most. You walk the trail in near solitude. Wind chimes hang from branches. Sometimes you hear a yak's distant bell, or the whisper of someone's prayer echoing faintly through the trees. But then you reach it, the tongue of stone, jutting from the hillside like a slow exhale frozen in time. It doesn't shimmer, it doesn't shine, it simply waits. A few stories even suggest the rock has changed slightly over time, a bit longer, a bit thinner. Some claim it bends ever so subtly toward the direction of the nearest village, as if listening more intently. It's easy to dismiss that. Stone doesn't move, but in Bhutan, time is measured differently. Centuries are considered brief. Perhaps the rock really is responding, just not in a way we can fully see. There's a legend among the older monks, one they don't tell lightly. long before the temples, before even the stories of the first kings. There was a time, they say, when dragons still walked the earth, not the fire-breathing beasts of Western tales, but guardians, keepers of energy, of knowledge. One dragon, the story goes, was tasked with guarding a sacred truth, something too powerful to be held by any single human. When it was time to leave, the dragon didn't simply disappear. It pressed its mouth to the mountain and whispered the truth into the stone, leaving its tongue behind as a symbol of the message it carried. But here's the catch. The message cannot be heard. It can only be felt, tasted by the soul. The rock, in turn, can taste your intent. That's why the monks say it listens, not for your voice, but for your spirit. So people come, they kneel, they press their palms to cool stone and close their eyes. And if they're lucky, the wind may shift just slightly, the clouds may part, and they might, just might, feel something press back. In our modern world, we often demand answers. We drill, measure, scan, record. But some things defy all that. Some things aren't meant to be solved, but experienced. The Dragon Tongue Rock is one of those things. A mystery not of construction, but of presence, of silence, of taste. And maybe if you ever find yourself walking a misty trail in Bhutan, with nothing but your questions and your heartbeat echoing in your ears, you'll come across a protrusion of stone shaped like lips mid-sentence. And you'll wonder, not what it says, but what it feels. Because in that place, in that moment, the stone may just taste your story too. Iran's solar-aligned tomb. In the vast silence of Iran's desert, where the wind barely speaks and the dunes roll like waves of time, there lies something most people would never notice. A small faded stone structure, sun-baked and nearly forgotten. No signs, no carvings, just weathered walls and a single narrow passage. But twice a year, this tomb wakes up. It happens only on the solstices, the longest day, the shortest, when the sun is at its most extreme, and for a few minutes on those exact days, a beam of golden light slips through the tomb's stone corridor, reaching deep into the chamber and striking a raised platform at the back. That light doesn't just warm the stone, it fills the room slowly, softly, like something ancient remembering itself. This isn't some massive royal monument. No pharaoh lies here. No statues, no inscriptions, no treasures. The tomb seems almost too plain, except for its precision. Archaeologists estimate it's about 2,500 years old. That's Achaemenid-era Persia. But even back then, building something aligned so perfectly with the sky, that wasn't ordinary. The chamber only lights up on those 2 days. Not before, not after. So the real mystery isn't what's inside, it's why it was made this way, and how. Because when you walk into that tomb, even today, you'll notice the strange silence. It swallows sound. There's no echo, no hum. It's as if time itself stands still inside, and when that beam of sunlight touches the back wall, it feels almost sacred, like someone or something is still watching. Some believe the tomb belonged to a sky watcher, a kind of priest or sage who measured the sun, marked the stars, and recorded time not in books, but in stone. The ancient Zoroastrians saw light not just as warmth, but as truth, cosmic order, the divine. So maybe this tomb wasn't just for a person, but for a moment of cosmic balance. A message passed down in silence, meant only for those who knew when and how to look. There are clues. On the stone platform inside the tomb are small marks, too deliberate to be random. Some researchers say they match star patterns seen during the solstice. Taurus, Orion, Pleiades, tiny constellations etched in stone, as if the tomb remembered not just the sun, but the night sky too. No written records mention this place. No legends survive. Just a quiet, peculiar ruin, half swallowed by the desert. But once you've stood inside, Once you've seen that single beam of light trace across the stone like a sundial's heartbeat, you know this wasn't just a tomb. It was a question, and the sky still holds the answer. India's spoke wheel temple courtyard. In the quiet heart of southern India, away from cities and forgotten by time, lies a temple that doesn't rise up to the heavens, but instead sinks into the earth. No golden towers, no towering sculptures, just a sunken courtyard made of stone, still and timeless, whispering secrets through the wind. At first glance, it seems simple. Just an open square framed by old stone steps. But when you look closer, when you follow the shapes beneath your feet, a pattern begins to emerge. Dozens of large round discs are carved into the stone floor. Each is shaped like a wheel, with perfect symmetry, with deeply carved spokes. Some have 8, others 16, a few more. They're not random, they're aligned. Each wheel is slightly rotated, angled not toward the temple entrance or cardinal directions, but toward the moon. Specifically, the moon's journey through the sky. Some wheels even align with its position during specific lunar phases: full, new, quarter, gibbous. The further you step into the courtyard, the more the pattern becomes clear. This isn't just a courtyard, it's a map. A living, breathing calendar made of stone. Local villagers have always called it Chandra Mandala, the moon circle. Elders whisper that the priests once used it to tell when to sow seeds, when to light lamps, when to pray. Not with clocks, not with dates, but with the dance of light and shadow across the wheels. Every night the moon would rise, casting its pale glow across the carved stones. And on certain nights, only a few each month, the light would strike the center of a specific wheel, like a spotlight on a stage. That was the sign. That was the moment. And still today, some claim it works, that even after thousands of years, the shadows know where to fall. What makes this site more mysterious is how little has been written about it. No inscriptions explain its purpose. No ancient texts mention it by name. The temple above it has been rebuilt many times, with frescoes and statues and shrines, but the spoke wheels, they were already there. Older, deeper. Archaeologists aren't sure how old the courtyard is. Some think it dates to the 7th century. Others believe it's even earlier, perhaps 2,000 years or more. Its weathered grooves suggest generations of footsteps, rains and time. And then there's the craftsmanship. Each wheel is perfectly carved, symmetrical, balanced, etched into stone, with such care that modern tools would struggle to replicate it. These weren't just decorations. They were instruments, tools of measurement, maybe even ceremony. Why underground? That's the question. Why place something so intricate, so deliberate, down where no sunlight ever fully shines? Some believe it was meant to be hidden, protected from erosion, from conquest, from change. Others think it was designed that way, so that only moonlight, not sunlight, would reach it. That this was never a temple to the sun, but to the night, to rhythm, to quiet, to time measured in silence. And maybe that's why it feels the way it does now. To when you sit there alone, in the center of the courtyard, surrounded by stone wheels and ancient alignment, you feel as if the place is still waiting, watching, marking the hours not in seconds, but in shadows. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It whispers of a time when calendars were carved, not printed, when the moon was your clock, and silence told you when to begin. No one knows who made it. No one knows why they stopped. But beneath that temple, carved deep into the Indian earth, the stone wheels remain. And they are still turning, even if we can no longer see them move. Egypt's mirror, Shine Granite Gateway. Not far from the Nile's ancient bend, past the sun-baked dust and half-forgotten temple walls, there's a gateway unlike any other. It doesn't guard a tomb. It doesn't lead to a chamber of gold. It's just a stone beam, a lintel, suspended between two silent pillars in the open air. But when the morning sun rises on just 2 days each year, this stone begins to shine, and not in a metaphorical way. It actually glows. Because this stone is polished, not roughly shaped, not weathered down, but polished like a mirror. Its surface reflects light so brightly that it startles birds from the nearby palm trees. It throws a single shaft of gold into the heart of the ancient plaza. And here's where the mystery begins. This isn't a modern discovery. It was found decades ago, nestled inside what remains of an early dynastic temple. But archaeologists didn't understand its importance until someone visited the site during the spring equinox. By accident, they didn't come for research. They were just passing through. But at sunrise, something happened. The angle of the sun hit the stone just right. A burst of light arced downward straight through the gate onto the stone courtyard below. Exactly centered, exactly aligned. It wasn't coincidence. It couldn't be. This stone gateway had been placed with extreme care. The pillars angled just right. The lintel shaped not just to span the entrance, but to capture the equinox light and release it only at that perfect moment. This wasn't architecture. This was a solar ritual machine. And then they looked closer. The stone itself, pink Aswan granite, was polished to a degree far beyond what tools of the time should allow. Its face was flat, without chisel grooves. Its corners were sharply squared, not worn or rounded. How did they do it? Polishing granite today takes diamond-grade tools and pressure sanders. But this gateway was built over 4,000 years ago, before Egypt had iron, before diamond-tipped drills, before mechanized grinders. Yet the mirror shine was real. Still is. And what was its purpose? Was it symbolic? Did the reflected light mark the moment of rebirth, the start of planting season? Was this the instant priests would begin sacred chants, or signal the first offering of the year? Some inscriptions hint at the gate of dawn and the shadow of Re, but the carvings are worn, fragmented. What they meant to ancient eyes, we still don't fully know. Some believe the gateway was part of a larger solar calendar, that scattered around it were other stones, now toppled or buried, that aligned with the solstice or harvest moon. Others suggest it was the first of many mirrors, maybe even a light pathway guiding rituals through the temple's darker rooms. But no other mirror stones have been found. Only this one, the last surviving piece of a forgotten science. A gateway that didn't just open a path, but captured the sky. Locals still call it the Whisper Gate. Not for any sound, but for the way it pulls people in. Travelers come and stand before it, not sure why. Some say it's the light. Some say it's the way the stone seems too perfect. Like it doesn't belong here. Like it was placed not by workers with tools, but by minds that understood the movement of the cosmos. Egypt is full of wonders, towers, tombs, temples. But sometimes the most powerful mysteries aren't massive. They don't shout. They whisper, just like this mirror shine gateway, waiting patiently each year for that moment of alignment, when the morning sun brushes its surface and history comes alive again. If only for a minute. If only for those who are watching. The melted temple of Maharashtra. It's early morning in the western Ghats of India. The humid air clings to your skin, and the sound of cicadas hums through the nearby forest. You follow a dirt trail winding gently uphill, where moss grows between ancient stones. The jungle feels timeless here, quiet, patient, and watching. Suddenly, the trees part, and there it is. A temple unlike any you've seen, not built, but carved straight into a black basalt cliff. At first glance, it looks like many other cave temples found across India, but step closer, and you begin to see something is off. The stone looks warped, melted, as if someone poured fire across the walls, and then froze it mid-drip. The textures ripple, burn, and twist. Yet amid this, detailed carvings remain perfectly intact. Pillars, elephants, deities, undisturbed by the melting chaos around them. Who built this? When? And more importantly, how? Locals call it Agni Kala Mandir, the temple of fire art. Some say it's cursed. Others believe it was sanctified by gods themselves. Archaeologists estimate it dates to the 6th or 7th century CE, But no king's name is written here. No inscription, no record. Just scorched stone shaped into a sacred puzzle. Inside the sanctum, the light dims. Your footsteps echo. You pass intricate carvings of meditating sages and guardians, some partially sunken into warped walls, others standing clean and untouched. How is this possible? Geologists offer guesses. Maybe it was a lava flow that hardened strangely, or fire damage. But if that's true, how did the delicate carvings survive? How did they carve the stone after it melted? Or was it melted on purpose? Some theorists whisper about forgotten tools, heat-based carving methods, resonance technology, even ultrasonic stonework. Too wild to believe? Maybe. But here, standing in the shadow of this melted shrine, it suddenly doesn't seem so impossible. There are stories passed down by villagers of a fire from the sky, long ago, not lightning, something brighter, hotter. It hit the mountain and left behind patterns, runes of flame hardened in basalt. And when modern visitors enter the temple, they sometimes speak of a sound, a deep hum, a vibration you don't hear, but feel, the rock itself breathing, quietly, alive. No one guards the temple now, no signs mark it on tourist maps, but for those who find it, the questions it raises are unforgettable. Could this be a surviving example of a lost technology, a glimpse into how ancient people shaped stone with precision we still struggle to match? Or is it simply nature and human hands colliding in just the right way to confuse us forever? Whatever the answer, the melted temple of Maharashtra stands silent, powerful, and deeply strange. You walk back down the path, still thinking. The jungle closes behind you, but a part of you stays there in the melted stone, in the silence, listening for answers that may never come. The glass road beneath Oman's sands. Somewhere in the vast, whispering deserts of Oman, beneath dunes that have shifted for thousands of years, lies a path not marked on any map, not visible to the naked eye, but unmistakable from the sky. A trail of glass, running beneath the sand. It was first noticed by satellite imaging, an unusual straight line glowing faintly in the infrared spectrum, slicing through an otherwise featureless landscape, a buried road. But not just any road. This one shimmered unnaturally, not with the dull reflection of stone or metal, but something else, something smooth, almost melted, something glass. When a team of geologists and archaeologists arrived at the site in 2011, they didn't expect to find anything unusual. Old caravan trails sometimes show up from above, but what they uncovered was baffling. Beneath just a few feet of wind-blown sand lay shards of flint, fused sand, and long panels of what appeared to be natural glass. Glass that had been intentionally laid down to form a surface. But how? Glass requires incredible heat to produce over 1,000 degrees Celsius. Modern kilns achieve this easily, but ancient civilizations, especially nomadic or desert-based cultures with limited resources, this seemed impossible. And yet, the road was real. Stretched for over 6 kilometers in broken segments, the route followed an ancient trade path used to transport incense, copper, and other valuable goods across the Arabian Peninsula. But it didn't lead to a city. Not anymore. At its farthest end, only ruins remained. Weathered stones half buried in sand, their shapes hard to read. But at one point, someone thought this road was worth the effort. Some believe the glass road was formed by accident. Lightning strikes over sand, fusing the surface. But this explanation fails under closer inspection. The glass wasn't randomly distributed. It was laid in a pattern, smoothed, aligned, even layered. Could there have been a technique, now lost, that allowed ancient builders to use solar energy, perhaps magnified through lenses or polished metals, to melt sand into glass? Or could this have been created by an even older civilization, one we know little to nothing about? Artifacts found along the road include charred wooden posts, broken copper tools, and strange ceramic lenses, convex and carefully ground. Were they magnifying tools, early solar devices, The objects don't match other regional finds, even stranger. At night, the air above the path is still slightly warmer than the surrounding desert. Some suggest this is residual heat trapped below, or perhaps the road's unique composition affects how it absorbs sunlight. Others aren't so sure. They talk about resonance, about frequency, about forgotten technologies hidden in the earth. A few local legends speak of a river of stars laid across the land, guiding ancient travelers by moonlight. Stories passed down by Bedouin elders tell of men who walked the sands and followed glowing trails that never cooled, trails that vanished when the winds grew too strong. When scientists analyzed the glass, they found it was chemically distinct from naturally formed desert glass, like that found in Egypt or Libya. This was engineered, controlled, consistent, but by who and for what purpose? Could this have been a sacred route, a ceremonial path, or something even more functional? A prototype for long-distance travel in harsh environments. There's also the curious absence of wheel ruts. If carts used it, they didn't leave marks. Was the road meant for walking, for animals, or perhaps for something else? A few speculative researchers on the fringe have suggested the road aligns with certain astronomical points, and that the glass may have carried light or sound over great distances, that it acted more like a conduit than a road. Wild ideas, but standing on that ancient glass, half buried under shifting sand, it's hard not to wonder, why build a road out of glass? Why here? Why, now forgotten? As the wind begins to pick up, and the sun dips low over the dunes, you imagine the sound of feet crossing that glass path 1,000 years ago. Maybe a caravan, maybe a lone traveler, maybe someone with knowledge we've lost. And as the sand covers your footprints once more, the desert holds its silence. The glass road beneath Oman's sands remains, mute, brilliant, and haunting, waiting. Saudi Arabia's glass dome calendar, a buried dome that focuses light only at solstices. Was it an ancient calendar in the middle of the desert, where the dunes stretch endlessly under a pale, hazy sun? Something impossible was found. Not in a grand ruin, not beneath a temple, but beneath the silence of open sand, in one of the most remote parts of Saudi Arabia's Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter. Buried beneath wind-blown layers of silt and time was something utterly unexpected. A dome, perfectly round, seamless, and partially made of fused glass. This wasn't recent. This wasn't modern. Carbon dating from surrounding deposits placed its construction somewhere around 1500 BCE, long before the existence of modern glass kilns in the region. And stranger still, this dome, once unearthed and partially reconstructed by archaeologists, did something magical. Twice a year, only on the solstices, light would strike the desert at just the right angle. And when it did, a beam of focused light would pass through a translucent slit in the dome's side, traveling downward, piercing a carved stone shaft, and landing right in the middle of a star-shaped floor. The site was found almost by mistake. In 2009, satellite imagery revealed odd discolorations in the sand, circular patterns that didn't match the natural movement of dunes. At first, researchers thought they might be remnants of a meteor impact, but the shapes were too symmetrical, and something about the way the sand piled atop the ring suggested buried architecture. When excavation began in 2011, the team expected perhaps a granary base, maybe even a tomb. What they found instead was baffling. A half-submerged stone ring, nearly 20 meters across, sat encircling a central, fused glass hemisphere, buried almost entirely under 3 meters of sand. The dome was cracked in places, but the structure was intact. Inside, the air was still, cool, and etched onto the interior of the dome, almost invisible to the eye, were star-like glyphs. Some familiar constellations, others totally unknown. Beneath the dome lay a series of stone rings carved into the floor, like ripples frozen in time. In the very center was a hexagonal depression, just deep enough to hold a small fire, or perhaps a sacred object. Surrounding the hexagon were radial lines, 12 of them, equidistant. The alignment wasn't random. Researchers soon discovered that the inner layout mirrored the solar calendar, tracking not just the solstices, but equinoxes and cross-quarter days as well. This wasn't a tomb. It wasn't a temple. It was a calendar you could walk through. A living observatory carved in stone and light. And then came the phenomenon. It happened at sunrise on June 21st. A single beam of light passed through a slit in the dome's upper glass, landing perfectly in the center of the hexagon. The same thing happened again, 6 months later, on December 21st, and not on any other day. No matter how researchers simulated the sun's path, that beam only aligned twice a year. The dome wasn't just a decorative structure. It was a solstice marker, perhaps the centerpiece of a ritual calendar, long forgotten. How did its creators understand solar movement with such precision? How did they produce glass that could endure millennia of desert exposure? And why build it here, far from any known ancient city or oasis? To this day, the glass dome calendar remains one of the most mysterious archaeological finds in the Middle East. There's no writing on its surface, no bones, no tools, only stone, sand, and light. Perhaps it was a shrine to the sun. Perhaps it was built by a priestly sect we've yet to discover. Or maybe, just maybe, it was never meant to be understood, only witnessed in a place where time erases nearly everything. This dome remains waiting for the sun to return. And when it does, it shines once more, just for a moment, just like it did thousands of years ago.